I don't know about you, but personally, I'm a little squeamish about anything to do with holiness. I hear the word holy, and the first things I think of are rules. Strict rules, and usually socially enforced. Maybe I'm not the only one who thinks of the phrase holier than thou. For me, this reaction doesn't improve much when I hear the term purity. Holiness, purity. Seems like these things are pretty good at making some people feel yucky. So what if I told you that both of these things are really important to the great God story? What if I told you that uncovering holiness is actually about understanding who God is and why God matters to who we are and to the lives that we're living? Probably not all of us have the connotations with holiness that I have. Hopefully, some of us first think of a definition of holiness: set apart. And actually, there are two that I'm working with today: set apart for a task and belonging to God. As I've been reading about this morning's text from Leviticus, I got really excited to learn about a parallel between the first line of this book and the first line of the next book, Numbers. Leviticus starts out on not so great footing. There's a broken relationship between the Israelites and God, who the Israelites understand to live in a tent, the tabernacle. After making a covenant with God at Mount Sinai, the Israelites broke the same covenant right away, and it harmed the relationship. So the first line in Leviticus says that God spoke to Moses from the tent. Moses isn't allowed in. But the first line of Numbers says that God spoke to Moses in the tent. It's this change that lets us understand what the book of Leviticus is actually about. It's about God, who is holy and good, providing a way for God's people, who are not always holy and good, to become holy and good enough to have an active relationship with God. Now, this doesn't make much sense if we're still thinking about holiness and purity as primarily about rules. It turns out that even though on one level Leviticus is a book of rules, that's not all it is. Leviticus is a book about life with a capital L. Our passage from chapter 19 is part of a section of the book that talks about moral purity. It's talking about caring for the poor, having sexual integrity, and acting justly. It mirrors an earlier section that gives us a better sense of this whole purity thing by talking about ritual purity. People had to be clean or pure in order to enter into God's presence, because God is holy. The folks over at the Bible Project talk about the different ways that the Israelites could become impure, such as touching a dead body or coming in contact with reproductive body fluids. They say, and I quote, "All of these were associated with mortality, with the loss of life," which gets us to the core symbol of all these ideas. You become impure when you're contaminated by touching death, so to speak. And death is the opposite of God's holiness because God's essence is life. End quote. So, God is holy, God is good, and God's essence is life. Impurity then isn't about how bad or how yucky we are. It's about how entirely good God is, and it's about reflecting that goodness in our lives. One thing that keeps striking me as I read this passage back to myself is the way every section ends the same way. I am the Lord your God. Yes, it's about rules, but way more than that. This passage is reminding us how good God is and giving the Israelites a set of guidelines to get that goodness into their everyday. Our text ends with the words, "You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against any of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord." This is the same line that Jesus quotes when he gives us the two most central commandments: love God and love others. Leviticus helps us to see that both of these are intricately and intimately connected. We love God by loving others, and we love others by loving God. Today is about being holy as God is holy. We belong to God, we are filled with life and with love. And we have work to do, set out for us by that life-giving Creator God. Ahead of us is the work of love, love's work. What does love's work look like for you? Love's work is the work of holiness, the work of drawing near to God. Is that about kindness in your relationships or justice in your city? Maybe holiness for you is about providing rest for others or about examining the decisions you're making in one part of your life. Whatever it is, God reminds you that God is the Lord, the Creator. Go, seek holiness, and know that you belong to a good God.